What is going on? It's brothers back in the house with another shitty fucking video. Now, this one is a very important video that I think every gamer should always tell, because everybody's story is a little different. I am referring to your gaming story. Now, what am I talking about? Well, I am talking about what games mean to you. When did you start playing games? Why did you start playing games? What games started you into gaming? And that is what this video is. I'm going to make, as brief as I can, a summary of why I started gaming up until why I still continue to game now. So, let's start this thing off in 1996. With my dad. He is about 30 years old. He has never really cared that much about games. He loved arcades, but mostly he loved arcades because he liked to play pinball and get chicks, because I guess that's how it was back in the 70s and 80s. A wild fucking time, I guess, but that's another story. I have no idea about that. So, the year's 1996. I'm going to be born in about a year. He decides it's time to invest in a gaming console so that he can have a little entertainment device for his kids, because God knows kids can be the fucking worst. And you gotta have something you can just stick them in front of to get them to leave you the fuck alone. Even though I've never had kids, I mean, I've been around enough of them to know that you gotta get the fuck away from them sometimes. So, he wants to get a gaming console for us, but also for him. So, the year's 1996, so there's 3 gaming consoles on the market at that time. You've got the PlayStation 1, the Nintendo 64, and the Sega Saturn. Now, if you're from the 1960s, and you're looking for a gaming console in 1996, you have probably not heard of the Sega Saturn, and you're probably not gonna buy it. I know I'm always slinging shit at Sega, man, but I really don't, hate them or anything. I didn't even know they were a gaming company. I've never even knew what they were until like a few years ago. It's just kind of a shame. They're kind of like in obscurity to me, and because I'd never really heard that much about them, it's hard for me to say heads or tails of it. I've just heard of some of their colossal failures, and I've only heard of a couple success stories with them. But I don't want to get into that again. I actually like Sega. I think some of their games are pretty fun, but I just don't know that much about them, and I think they're kind of obscure. But back onto the main story. So the year's 1996. So if you haven't really heard of the Sega Saturn, chances are you're probably either going to buy a Nintendo 64 or a PlayStation 1. So you got to weigh your pros and cons. Do you want to get a Nintendo console, which is known for making more kid-friendly games, or are you going to get the PlayStation 1? What does the PlayStation 1 even offer when you're thinking about games and you don't know much about games? So what my dad pretty much thought of games is that most of them were just made for kids, that there's nothing really that interesting. That is actually precisely why he got a PlayStation 1, is because for the first time he saw a lot of games with a much more mature tone, things that he could actually enjoy, simulation games, things along his style. And that one particular game that he saw that he had to have, of all things, was Ace Combat 2 at the time. My dad was in the Air Force, and he loves planes. He loves everything about planes. He always wanted to be a jet fighter and all this stuff, so when he saw a game that's basically a jet fighter simulation game, how can you not be enthralled? So that is ultimately what caused my dad to buy a PlayStation 1. Now, when he went to buy one, he actually got a copy of Final Fantasy VII, as like a little in-the-box bonus with it. So, now we're in the year 1997. I've been born, and the PlayStation 1 is now our home console, which is where gaming officially began for me. About the age of 4, I'm gonna say, the year was probably about 2000. Now, we were a more poor family, so even though the PlayStation 2 was probably already out, I really didn't know about it, and my parents didn't keep up with that kind of thing. So, to my knowledge, the PlayStation 1 was the best and coolest thing on the market. There was nothing else like it. So, I just remember my first gaming experience was at the age of 4. I remember seeing my dad playing Ace Combat 2, and I decided, I asked him if I could play, and he said sure, and I instantly was good at it, almost better than him. I've probably mentioned that story somewhere on here before, but that is when I first officially knew that I was going to love games. So again, we're a poor family. I loved Ace Combat 2, and we don't have a whole lot of games. So growing up, I had a very select few games that I absolutely loved, and it's actually kind of a shame because looking back on them, people don't have very good opinions on these games. I had Twisted Metal 4, which is one that's not regarded very highly by fans of the Twisted Metal series. I had Twisted Metal Small Brawl, which was again not very popular at all, apparently. What else? I had Alundra 2, which I got from a friend, which I guess has good review, or no, I think it's the original one that's fun, but I had the second one for no fucking reason. I didn't even know what the first one was, and I've heard that the second one's kind of a piece of shit anyway, and from playing it, it really is. If the first one is good, don't let me offend you, but I thought the second one was a piece of shit, and without even playing the first one, I'll never know. So, and that pretty much wraps up my experience. You got Ace Combat, Twisted Metal, and Alundra. Then, that's when the Final Fantasy series kind of pops in. Like I said, my dad had Final Fantasy VII, but he didn't even want to play it at all. My dad was like me when I was little. When I wanted to buy a game when I was little, the first thing I looked at was how cool the cover art looks, what the game's name was, and the only things I really found interesting were shooters and action games. So, a game like Final Fantasy VII with its cover art doesn't really look that visually pleasing to someone who's looking for all in-your-face action. So, my dad never really played it. But when he finally did, he was so blown away by it. And just the storyline, all of the characters, he and my mom played the shit out of it. And this, as a kid, I thought it was simply amazing. I didn't know how to even play the games barely, but I loved the way the combat played. So what my parents would have me do is when they were bored they weren't very good at the game. They'd buy all the instruction manuals and the walkthroughs and stuff and still wouldn't be able to play it very well because they weren't very fast at the controls. So they'd have me sit there and grind for them. They'd go to some place with some decent leveled enemies and they'd make me sit there and grind for hours and hours and hours. And I loved every minute of it. God, my parents were cruel, but I really loved it as a kid because I felt like my parents were engaging me in something, so I felt like I was getting to be a part of my family through gaming, something that I had already known that I loved as a kid. I now found a way to bond with my family over, and that experience was so cool that it's why I still have such a love for the franchise today. It's harder for me to see flaws because I've grown up playing these games, loving the combat. So even games with, where some kids nowadays I know who can't get past the turn-based combat and who think it's too slow and not in your face enough, there's something so mindless about some of the battles that it's just so easy to play and so fun for me. But again, that doesn't have a whole lot to do. That's a little bit of a rant about Final Fantasy that we don't need to go into yet again. So there you go. That's the PlayStation 1 pretty much in a nutshell for me. I played a lot of Twisted Metal. I had gotten Crash Bandicoot and loved a Crash Bandicoot Warped. I had Crash Bash, which I really liked, but I pretty much stuck with about 5 or 6 or 7 games for about 3 years before eventually I was in the middle of playing Twisted Metal 4 with my brother. I used an attack with Rob Zombie that I don't know how this is physically possible, but it literally broke the PlayStation. Like, I don't mean that metaphorically. It caused the little what would be the proper term for it? The little thing where you stick the disc on, it popped out of the console when I did that attack, and was the PlayStation 1 from that point on never worked again. So it was time to move on. I'm gonna say the year was probably about 2003, 2004, 2005, somewhere in that era. I'm probably about 8 years old. I'm getting older. What the hell? Ignore that. That's my shitty cat making some really freaky noises. Anyway, so I'm about 8 years old, or so. And now I've finally moved on to the PS2. I'm near the end of its fucking lifespan. The PS3 is on the horizon, and we're just now getting a PS2, because again, we're kind of poor. And now, this time, I'm older. And why would we choose the PS2? Well, of course, with my family, we loved the PlayStation 1. With the PS2, my parents could watch movies on it, even though they bought a DVD player, because they were too fucking stupid to know they could do that. But, eventually, when they found out it could do that, they used it for that. Of course, knowing that the PlayStation 1 was so good, my parents, their motto is pretty much, if a company made it good the first time, then they can't fail. So they stuck with Sony. If Sony did it right the first time, that's the producer they're gonna buy from. So that was pretty much where we got that, the PS2. But that is not where my gaming story goes. Oh no. My gaming story goes that Christmas. I had went over to my cousin's house where she had a GameCube. And she had a copy of fucking Shrek 2. Probably like one of the shittiest games you could ever play on a GameCube, dude. I fucking thought it was awesome. Because it had a 4-player co-op feature, and me and my brother played it with our cousin, we had the fucking time of our life. It didn't take much to impress the little 7 or 8-year-old me. So when Christmas came around, I actually didn't want a PlayStation 2. I wanted a GameCube. I wanted Nintendo. I was still young, and Nintendo games just tended to appeal to the younger audiences. So that's where my gaming story goes, is for Christmas, my parents knew that I was a GameCube guy. They asked me what I wanted for Christmas, if I wanted to get a gaming console, and I told them I wanted a GameCube. I remember my dad specifically asking me, "Are you sure you want that, or do you want a PS2 or an Xbox?" Now, my dad actually wanted me to try and buy an Xbox. I remember him just thinking Bill Gates, if a console is backed by Bill Gates, he figured God knows how much money he put into it. It has to be the next big thing. So that's what he wanted. He wanted me to get an Xbox, but as a kid, I didn't fucking know. I wasn't thinking. I just wanted a fucking console and a game. And the one I saw and was interested in was the GameCube. So I got a copy of Medal of Honor European Assault and my GameCube for Christmas. And that is where my gaming story really truly begins, from where I really consciously remember having the best memories. PlayStation 1 is still where it all began for me, but by the GameCube, that's when things really started to take shape. And now I'm going to take a quick moment to pause because my audio is about to cut out, and I don't want it to do that in the middle of a little rant here. And we're back in black. So, again, with the GameCube, that is the console I got. Now, I actually still loved the PlayStation, and because you could play PlayStation 1 games on the PS2, that was one of the biggest selling points for my parents. So my parents had a PS2 out in the living room, and me and my brother both got GameCubes for Christmas, which we put in our rooms. So, the story is, I loved my GameCube, but admittedly, that wasn't where the center of gaming was. We had two smaller TVs, and me and my brother shared a room. We had two little small, cheap TVs. So when we really wanted to play games the right way, we went out to the living room to play on the big flat, I don't know if it was a flat screen, but the big TV with the PS2. because that's where all of my favorite games were. Not to say that I didn't love the GameCube and have some games I raped on it, but I'll get into that. But the PS2 was kind of where I remember spending the most time, and with a few games in particular. Star Wars Battlefront 2, just saying that name gives me chills and nostalgia. You cannot make a better military game. I loved combat, I loved shooters as a kid. I wanted to be in the military when I was a kid. And the video games that showed off, you know, being a part of a big group of soldiers going off to fight the enemy, something about that really inspired me. So, Battlefront 2 does that perfectly, combined with the Star Wars universe. You know, you can't get it much better. I loved Star Wars because my dad loved it, and I loved pretty much anything my parents loved. So a military, awesome third-person, first-person shooter with the Star Wars theme was perfect. I still play that game to this day and love it, and still, if anybody in the fucking world wants to play a Galactic Conquest Versus, I'm up for it. I never got to do that because my brother refused because he knew I was going to kick his ass. No one will play that with me. I want to kick someone's ass at a Galactic Conquest. I goddamn dare you, but that was one of the most pivotal games for me. One of the reasons why I wanted to play the PS2 so much was really Galactic Conquest with Battlefront 2 on the fucking PS2. Another major game that I remember having on GameCube though was a game called Battalion Wars, which is in my opinion a hidden gem that not many people know of. It's a little Nintendo exclusive. It's kind of a tactical command game where you have a bunch of different units that are specialized against certain kinds of other enemy units. And the whole point of the game is to send in the right units to fight the right mobs of enemies, or to use the right group of units to take down the right group of enemies. And there's so many missions and really cool bonus levels, and that tactical feel that you can get from that game, coupled with its more childish take on it, makes it a really good game. Made it perfect for me, because I loved tactical games. I didn't even know I loved tactical games, but Battalion Wars is the reason why I knew I loved tactical games. It was a great introduction of that kind of tactical feel, and is one of my favorite games of all time for that reason. So, Battalion Wars was an awesome game. I actually had a few other games I really liked. Star Fox Assault is a game that, even though I know a lot of people don't like it, that was the only Star Fox game I knew existed. And I remember playing it actually on a little demo thing they had in a Walmart, and it freaked me out at first. Playing as a furry character or whatever was not something I was accustomed to. I'd mostly played the military shooters like Call of Duty Finest Hour and Medal of Honor European Assault. I hadn't really played a game at that point that was like that. So it freaked me out, but I really liked what I had played of it in the demo, and when I got it, I thought it was phenomenal. Simply as a game on its own, without thinking of it in the terms of the other Star Fox games, it's pretty freaking good. It couples a lot of different elements that I think are really fun. Even I know a lot of people don't like the ground levels that much, but I think that they kind of break up the gameplay a little. I like a space shooter or whatever, but I thought that, you know, those were fun. But anyway, that's another debate I don't want to get into. Let's get back. We don't have a lot of time here, so we got to get into the nitty-gritty. So those are a few gaming experiences back on that time. So let's flash forward about another 5-6 years. The year is about 2008 or 2009. I have now accumulated a total of like 60 GameCube games and about 15 different PS2 games. And now, finally, the PS2 had gotten dated, and I was bored with playing GameCube games. I was getting to be a teenager. I wanted something new. So, we had gotten a little bit of money extra from a tax refund, and my dad was hearing about the new PlayStation 3 on the market. Now, again, really looking on it, Xbox 360 is kind of superior in a lot of ways to the PS3, but I'm not going to talk about any of that until my 7th generation console video review. But, you know, my dad, you know, just wanted to go again, a tried and true PlayStation 3. And I'll never forget, we got a copy of UFC, of all things, as like the little bonus game that comes with it. And I was blown away by how good it looked. I mean, it's pretty stupid, but honestly, compared to what I'd been playing, that game was the first game to be really HD. You know, it's the year's 2009 or 8, and I've still been playing PS2 and GameCube games where everything was pixelated still and rough around the edges, but this time I didn't see any pixels. And I remember watching the little intro sequence of "So, you want to be a fighter?" with all the little fucking different UFC fighters and thinking, wow, this is what the PS3 is, huh? This is what awaits me. And then that's when my more modern gaming craze kind of began, where I was older and more self-aware. Games weren't just about being a kiddie pastime thing that I did when I came home from school. Now it was a hobby, something I was officially doing and participating in more reliably. It was also when I was starting to grow sick of gaming in general. I played a lot of good games, but I was feeling like I had seen it all. A lot of the games I had played as a kid were kind of shitty, especially on the GameCube. A lot of really bad kids games, like a bad SpongeBob Creature from the Krusty Krab game, Universal Studios Theme Park, and Shrek 2. A lot of really bad games, and not that many great games. I'd missed out on a lot of good GameCube classics like Legend of Zelda games and Mario games. I didn't even know about them. It's pathetic, really. So I was kind of sick of games. I felt like I'd seen most of it, and I was bored. Even though I loved the PS3 at first and was blown away by the graphics, after a period of time I just kind of felt like I'd seen it all, and that I didn't really have anything else to look forward to in the world of gaming. That is when one of the most monumental games of all my life finally came, and that was Skyrim. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in a Target, probably the worst place to go and buy video games, next to Walmart, and there were 2 games on sale. There was BioShock Infinite and Skyrim, and there was a bunch of others, but those are the only 2 that I paid attention to. BioShock Infinite was $60 and Skyrim was $20. In my mind, I was still kind of stupid. It was like I was like 14 or 15. I still wasn't thinking very clear. I figured anything with the highest price tag was probably the better option. So BioShock Infinite again, like $60. I wanted to get that, and I'd heard a few things about it and was excited to play it. And my brother got Skyrim, and I remember telling him, bruh, that game's $20, don't buy that. You know, they're trying to get rid of it, it's on sale. And he was like, no, I've heard things about this game, it's really awesome. And I was like, whatever. So sure enough, we were sharing a PS3 at the time. We hadn't had our individual consoles, and because the GameCube and stuff were dated, we only had one PS3, so me and my brother were back to pretty much having to fight over a console. So I got home, and I decided to play first, and I was enjoying BioShock. And then I watched my brother play a little bit of Skyrim. And boy, I didn't even know what to think. At first I thought it was kind of stupid. I was like, you know, whatever. And then I actually went and played it. I never stopped. I never fucking stopped. I still haven't stopped. I still have a save file on my PS3 where I still play, and there's always still something to do. It finally made me realize that there was always something to enjoy about games. Now we're gonna flash forward even more years, the year's 2013. I've officially become a PlayStation fanboy. I participated in the console wars, I talked all kinds of shit, and I was kind of beginning to feel like Xbox 360 was superior, and I was really jealous. You know, I hadn't seen very many great PlayStation 3 exclusives, or at least not many that I'd played. And that is when The Last of Us came out in 2013. Let's see, I'm probably like 15 or 16 when this happened. And suddenly I became a fanboy all over again. I remember just being so happy that we had finally gotten a new exclusive that was so groundbreaking. And I played it, and I fucking cried so much, and I loved every minute of it. And I felt this connection again with Sony that I felt like I was beginning to lose. And I knew that when the PlayStation 4 came out, that was the console I wanted to buy. I was now old enough to start working a little bit part-time, and I decided over the summer, when the PS4 was announced, that it was time for me to make my first choice, my choice as to what console I wanted to buy with my money that I worked for. And that was between the Wii U, the Xbox One, and the PS4. And in my opinion, there is no question about which console is the best of this generation. I saved up the money and bought a PS4. Now, I will admit, I've actually been a little disappointed with PlayStation 4. For the most part, I really don't think there's that many good games out on next gen in general. Most of the really good games that are out are mostly re-releases of already really good games that I don't really want to play anymore. I've already raped them, like Borderlands, Witcher, and you know, Witcher's pretty much the best game that came out for next gen, and I just don't really like it, and I don't know why. There's nothing wrong with the game, but I think it's the fact that I've played so many Squaresoft RPGs, which I think I've said this before, but Squaresoft RPGs are what really do it for me, and it's hard for me to enjoy other RPGs, sadly. So, I haven't really enjoyed The Witcher, and I haven't really found that many great next-gen titles, but that is where the gaming future, my gaming future is coming, because I played the Uncharted Nathan Drake collection, which I never played Uncharted on the PS3 before. I was blown away by it, and now I'm looking forward to Uncharted 4 that still hasn't come out, that's about to come out. The new Doom game, which was a game that was the first like violent video game my parents ever let me play. And I'm just really excited for my gaming future now. So that was my gaming story. Started off from the PlayStation 1, branched off from there, and the PlayStation 4 became the first console I ever bought with my own money, and now I own about 9 disc-based games and a couple titles, and I'm working to build up my collection there. So, and that leaves us off to today. So, please, if anyone wants to, just share your gaming story. It's something that everybody really needs to do. It really feels good to reflect on everything that had you get into gaming, everything that really spoke to you about gaming. So I highly recommend it. It's really fun just to reflect on it. I'd love to hear some other people's stories, because everybody's story about how they got into gaming is different. I was born into it. Maybe you didn't get into it until you were much older. So anyway, thank you guys for listening. I really enjoyed making this video. I love to talk about video games and anything like that, so my next video I'm hoping to make is my 7th generation console review video, which will probably be controversial too, and I'm hoping to give Sega a little bit more credit. I'm gonna try and talk a little bit less shit about them the next time. So, see you guys next time around. Peace. All kind of crazy fucking crap.